My name is Jamie Lenhart, and I want to welcome you back to A Table for One. Well, as you can see, I'm not in my normal filming location. Not that I can't be inside, but I just really wanted to enjoy this wonderful weather we've been having, and so I decided to come out under the tree and do filming outside sometimes. So, before we jump into our normal elements of A Table for One, first of all, if you have not subscribed to the SFC video channel yet, click subscribe below so you'll get to know whenever a new video comes out. This last week, we had our second drive-in service. And it was great getting to see people. If you got to come, it was wonderful. If you didn't, we still had the streamed service, of course. But we're actually going to do a third one. We're going to do another in 3 weeks. So what we figured out, or kind of have been planning, is trying to balance how often to do the drive-in services, because we want to make sure we're getting together still as much as we can in ways that we can. But at the same time, those drive-in services are really surprisingly a lot of work. And it's the best way I can liken it is to times that I've been parts of some church plants. Some churches where you're brand new, you don't have your own facility, your own building, you have to pull everything out and put it away each week. And it's a lot of work. So trying to balance the workload and not burning out volunteers and the staff, but also still facilitating getting together, because that's important, I think, to all of us. So we're doing them about every 3 weeks or so. So we know we have one in 3 more weeks. And the big difference to this next one is going to be we're going to do it an hour earlier. So rather than the 11 o'clock service like we normally do, we're going to do it at 10 o'clock. It just gets us out a little bit earlier and also avoids if it gets a little too hot. So join us again in 3 weeks for the drive-in service at 10 o'clock. And obviously there's some out there that you just can't do it. Either you don't drive, or even if you're just in the situation of you have young children and they're not going to handle sitting in the car for that length of time, it's just not worth it. I get it. It's not always worth it with my kids. But that's why we're still streaming the service. Jeremy was able to figure out this last week how to stream from exterior or outside, and it was great. And so we're going to do that again, so you're still going to be able to take part in the service even if you can't be there live. But again, in 3 weeks, we're going to have another drive-in service. But before that happens, this coming Saturday on the 15th, we're going to have a community prayer time. And when I say that, what I mean by community prayer, we're going to be out in the community. We're not like making this some big event out there, but Tony started putting this together, and really the heart of it is that as believers, one of the best and biggest things that we're called to do is to pray. So we are going to gather at 9 o'clock on the 15th out in front of City Hall in Springfield, the library and everything there, and get a little bit of instruction and then break up into groups and pray and just cover our community and our city and the people around us in prayer during this time. And one of the things that we're wanting to make sure people know is that, I guess the best way I could say this is that there have been some church groups that haven't been the best example to the community. And the best way I can liken that is, we have many freedoms in our faith. And it's wonderful. But at the same time, when we flaunt those freedoms, it can become a detriment to be able to proclaim the life and gospel of Christ. So what we're asking people is, in this event that we're having, is we're asking for people to wear masks, I know, and we're asking for people to keep the social distancing when they're outside of family groups, because where we want to get together and pray in unity, we also want to be an exemplary example to the community around us, that we are caring for them in all the ways that need to be cared for, even if we don't always like it. So we really want to encourage you, come join us in that time of prayer and unity. Again, that's going to be this coming Saturday, the 15th at 9 o'clock. The city hall already knows, the police already know, because we didn't want them to be surprised, because this isn't some weird protest thing. This isn't a cause outside of the cause of praying for our city. So that's going to be happening this coming Saturday. Come and join us. It should be a great time of just prayer and lifting up our community. So this week, no, that's not like emotion. So this week, I want to change up a little bit of what I'm going to do. So normally we would have our meditative moment, and then we'd go into our table talk and our conversation. Well, this week I'd like to flip it on its head. Because I got to catch up with Sid Marks, who's been a part of our church for a long time, and hear about what he's been doing with God in his life, and it's really for quite a while. And there was just something in me that said, don't do the meditation first. Hear the conversation, and then let's meditate on something. Then I'm going to ask you a question like I normally do. So we're just going to flip it on its head. But I really hope you enjoy the conversation that Sid and I had, so please enjoy our time of table talk with Sid Marks. Well, Sid, thank you for being with us this week.
Glad to be here, Jamie.
So we met back, at least my memory is back with doing the middle school group with Grant Chin.
Yes.
Way back, I was in high school, and your son was in it, and then a group of guys that you brought pretty often. And I think they played basketball together and things like that, and were friends and stuff. Those were important times for me. Like that was you were impactful to me back then, because you were a dad that was very intentional and involved with his son and with middle schoolers. Which
played basketball with your dad in those days. We played together.
Oh, so. I forgot he did that.
Yeah.
Yeah, all you guys going over to Briggs and playing ball. And then you were at least had some, I think, involvement with the van ministry we did then, which brought a lot of kids to the youth group.
Yeah.
A whole lot. That was a lot of kids, and a lot of kids from interesting situations and backgrounds.
Yeah.
That was not necessarily the easiest group sometimes, because they didn't have that growing up in church experience.
Whenever somebody said Sid's kids, that usually meant that I needed to pay attention to what was going on.
Yeah. One of the reasons I wanted to get together was before COVID, we had started actually building an idea of a series for the table, and it was about ministry and in some ways ministry in non-traditional ways. And there's something you've been doing for a long time, and I think it started kind of out of that group of kids and everything, and kind of a basketball ministry. So what is that you've been doing? Or maybe not right now.
Yeah, basically, this started by just being intentional about relationships versus, quote, build any kind of ministry, and more a matter of whatever we do, whatever it is that you're doing, do that as unto the Lord, and then ministry just happens.
Yeah.
It's inevitable. If you're doing whatever as unto the Lord, that's groundbreaking in various ways.
Yeah.
So.
Well, one of the things that we found fascinating was, and part of it is, again, for me as somebody that's grown up in the church, often when the words ministry get thrown around, they're kind of very specific niche things, and it's very church centric. And then when it's outreach, it's very church outreach centric, and be it special events or things like that, where you're trying to draw people into the church. And you did something that the best way I look at it is that you created a space for ministry to happen.
The space was there. I just was maybe aware of it and sensitive to it, and it was unavoidable because all these kids on my team at that point, there was no mother-father figure in the home.
Mm-hmm.
And two of the 10 kids that I had initially had a mother-father figure, and neither of them had their biological parents in the home.
Okay.
And so they would just glom onto you. I mean, here's a dad figure, you know.
Yeah.
And today I have guys who, every Father's Day, you know, I get calls and messages, and I'm very inadequate in myself. My biggest concern, especially early on, was, God, I sense you leading me this direction, but how do I know that I can even be a decent dad to my one son?
Yeah.
And one time, Jason and he was 9 years old, and I'd taken him on a backpacking trip, and we were on the almost the top of Mount Washington. And we'd spent the night at tree line, and when we were sitting there looking over this great expanse, and God was talking to me about bringing and including kids, young kids, to these kind of events, and I was just struggling with it, and I knew it was the Lord speaking, but I was like, how could that be?
Yeah.
How can I even be adequate for something like that? And my son, out of the blue, not even knowing that God was, you know, speaking through his young heart, said, "Hey, Dad, we've got to do this kind of thing with the guys. Because if we don't, how will they ever know about this stuff?"
Oh, that's awesome.
This was a 9-year-old kid, and I was just like, "Oh God, you don't play fair." And then years later, there was a young man one of those kids that my son brought into the, you know, call it ministry if you want, but brought into the group, and we brought to church, and his whole family ended up coming to church, and many of them accepting Christ.
Wow.
I had employed him, which I did a lot of these guys later on. And one day when he was working for me, and I'd said this to a few people here and there, I'd said, you know, buddy, friend, Joe, whoever, I can never be the dad that you should have had, that your dad should have been for you, but I'll be here for you, I'll do my best. And I'd said that to, we'll call him Buddy, before, and he said, "Okay, Sid, that's enough. I'm going to interrupt you right now." He said, "I've heard you say this before, and I know you've said that to so-and-so, and you've said it to so-and-so, and now you're saying it again to me and, you know, 2 guys at that point that were working for me that I'd known since they were real young." He said, "To you it's just a Band-Aid and you don't feel adequate, but to us it's a lifesaver." And so that's my message to people. We don't have to be good at it. We don't have to be, you know, have this title.
Yeah.
We just have to be available and be sensitive to people's needs. And ministry just happens if you do it as unto the Lord.
Yeah.
And, you know, over the years, well, I could go on and on and on. There's too many stories, but...
Well, what I love what you're saying is, because even just like as guys that I know, we kind of call it Sid's basketball ministry, of this thing of that you know, when I say creative space, is that, you know, often it's this idea of like, oh, get them into the church, and you're like, no, I'm just going to use this space where we gather together, and they're going to hear the gospel from me. They're going to experience Christ And you made room in your life. You cleared out some of the distractions so that they had a chance to interact with God.
Yeah.
And it was by playing basketball.
Yeah.
It
Basketball was just where we built a relationship.
yeah. And you know, it used something it used a common denominator of a game
Yeah.
to facilitate an experience for them, and a lifelong experience.
Yeah, I mean, and today, I mean, some of those guys have gone to prison, you know, and I've visited them in prison, and they're out doing well. Multiples of them ended up with addictions that were devastating, and some of them to this day are just on fire for Jesus as a result of, you know, just staying with. There was a young man who, he was probably 16 at the time, and we were playing ball, and I was trying to teach him about teamwork. I have this card I give out to everybody that says there's 10 players in a game and one ball. What you do that 90% of the time that all eyes aren't on you will determine your success or failure in basketball and in life. And so I was trying to teach him that it wasn't all about him, and I was guarding him. And he put his head down and dribbled to the corner, and I'm going like, what now, you know? And I'm got him trapped in the corner. He loses it. He elbows me in the face. He says, get off of me. Cut a hole clear through my lip. So that if he hears this, he'll know he cut a hole through my lip. I've never said anything about it before. I just kept swallowing the blood, you know? And the rest of the team was going to just jump all over him. And I said, no, we're okay. And I went home and I said, okay, Buddy's done. We can't have Buddy anymore. He's just too many of these things. That night, Joby Jarvis, who was also working with this young man on a different level through Young Life, he calls me and he says, hey Sid, I know that you really love Buddy, who I was about to kick off the team.
Oh.
And you really care and you minister to him and these other guys. And you know, I think we could get him to go to Young Life Camp if somebody would pay the 300 and some bucks. And I just think you're the guy, you know, and I'm like, oh God, you don't play fair. Buddy and I are, that's not his name, of course,
yeah.
But we're great friends today. In fact, Thursday, we went on an adventure together, hiked to a waterfall that neither of us had been to, and got to talk about important stuff.
That's great.
You know, anyway, I could go for hours,
yeah.
But it comes down to the times that I've said, okay, God, can I please just cross this guy off my list or whatever? Then the Lord would just humble me and say, you know, Sid, you're still on my list. I'm like, okay, God, you don't play fair. You know, and I think just being consistent. So many times I'll get a phone call and I'll see who it is and I'm just like, oh man, I know what this is about. I answer the phone and I say, hey buddy, I'm sorry I can't talk to you right now. I'll call you back in 5 minutes. Will you please hang in there for 5 minutes? And I put the phone down and I say, oh God, I know I'm inadequate. This is up to you. I can't do this stuff. Call him back and God does a miracle, you know? Trust me, man. Ask my wife. I screw up all the time, you know? Not because I'm perfect.
But you're there.
Know, God's gracious.
I mean, what people don't know about when I set up these conversations, and you've a perfect example of this, that I have an idea what we're going to talk about, a little one. I never know exactly where it's going to go. And what's amazing, because obviously my thought was around the basketball ministry, but
Well, we can get to that
no, but the
too.
testimony of what you're saying of you're, like I just said, you're there.
Yeah.
That it's not about your qualifications. It's not about doing it perfectly. It's not about even all the planning that you've put into place, all those things. It's you were willing to be there and let God do something. And obviously, it's impacted these men.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's impacted you. And it doesn't mean that it's been easy.
Oh man,
It,
I got some stories there too. You know. I mean,
but it's been worth it.
yeah. Oh, absolutely. Been called racist when I wanted to just stand up and scream in defense of myself, and instead the Lord said, just invite him out for a hamburger, you know. Pay for his next pair of shoes, you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
When we start defending ourselves, when we start trying to prove that we belong, that we're adequate, when we know in our heart we're not adequate, when we know in our heart that by grace alone, God can take a broken vessel as healing for other broken vessels, oh my goodness.
Yeah. I guess probably my biggest question within all this is, what encouragement how would you encourage people to live their life or shift how they think or how they operate to live life like what you're doing? And I'm not saying go out and create a basketball thing or go, but what you've been talking about of being available to what God's doing, how would you encourage people to make that a foundational element of their life, of how to shift what they're doing and be open to and be aware of it?
Maybe a good example is my answers are always in stories, and I'm sorry if this.
I love it.
But maybe a good example would be, I had a bad head injury. Was 3 years in the healing. In fact, the healing was a miracle, and the miracle was now Gabe Barrero, another youth leader in our youth group. At one point, I said to Gabe, he was asking me to do something, and I said, I haven't slept for 2 days. I feel like tearing somebody's head off, and it might be yours, and I said, I need to bail out or not, or I need a miracle. And he looks at me and he goes, well, it's worth a try. And we prayed this short prayer, and I said, Gabe, my headache's gone. And he looks at me and he goes, are you lying to me? So there's such a sermon in that. Because it wasn't because we were or he was in tune to miracles. He was just doing what a believer's supposed to do.
Yeah.
And he also knew that I was in denial. And I was a very strong-willed, I'm going to press ahead and get this done anyway. And when you're in denial, there's a level of dishonesty. And he knew me well. He just lived down the street from me. He knew. And he says, are you lying to me? And I said, Gabe, my headache's gone. I've never had one of those headaches since.
Wow.
That was God's intervention, because I was vulnerable enough to say, I need a miracle. And he was open enough to say, it's worth a try. And God answered.
Well, I can't think of a better answer to my question of, might as well try. I mean.
And ministry happened.
Yeah.
I wasn't saying, let's go down this road and get a miracle so ministry can happen. And it was just, okay, we're going to go on this activity or not. There's a whole backstory there too, but I don't want to embarrass Gabe or me. It was a matter of, there was a group of kids in the van. We were ready to head out and do a, quote, ministry, just activity with the kids, an overnighter in the mountains. And we were honest, we were vulnerable. Okay, if we're going to do this, let's do it unto the Lord, and we need Him. And when you commit to do whatever you do is unto the Lord, by golly, ministry just happens.
Amen.
And so now today, where we are now, I promise I get to the gym ministry. Once a week, we just open a gym, play ball, meet people, build relationships, and for maybe 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes, 10 minutes would be really long. I'll just stop and just share Jesus with the guys, and then we get back and play ball. And it's amazing how often afterwards somebody will come to me and go, dude, we need to talk.
That's great.
I don't push it, you know, I don't have, in fact, I miss so many opportunities. That inadequacy thing there. How can I cover it all, even financially? And that's a whole different thing.
Well, Sid, you know, I don't want to keep you all day, but thank you. You've said so many truths in 20 minutes. I mean, just being there, being available, doing it always with the mindset I'm doing this for my Savior, and just being open and available to these young men for so many years. It's an inspiration, and it's a good lesson, I think, for many of us to look at, see, and hear about, of what can happen when we're open to what God's doing in just the simple things, and caring for people. So thank you very much for sitting down with me this week. It's been a great conversation. You know, when I reach out to somebody to have one of these conversations, I always have a little bit of an idea in my mind of what I would like to talk about. And it's not fully fleshed out, because I like the conversation to be more natural and organic. But, you know, with Sid, I had this idea of talking about his ministry, his parachurch ministry that he does, this basketball, weekly basketball time he does with these young men. And, you know, so it's kind of about, the thought in my head was about making space for ministry, setting aside space for it in your life. But obviously God did something in the midst of the conversation, and we shifted from that to something else. And that brought up some thoughts in me that I'd like us to meditate on before we have our kind of our final takeaway question. And, you know, it's about following. That Sid really started talking about being open and following God for what he was leading. And in Scripture, that word and that idea are all over the place, pretty naturally. But obviously, the one that we probably think of the most often is when Jesus calls out to Peter and some men and says, "Come follow me and be fishers of men." And other places, you know, he'll say, "Follow," and people will come to him and say, there's one disciple who came to him and said, "I want to follow you. And but first, let me go bury my father who just died." And Jesus said, "No, let the dead bury the dead," which seems kind of harsh, but he's saying if you want to follow, you need to be all in and follow. And also a scribe came and said, I want to follow you. And Jesus, speaking to that man's heart, was, you gotta understand, you're leaving behind your comforts in your home. There is no place to lay your head when you are a follower of me, because we're going out into the world. And so people came and said, I want to follow you. And he said, come and follow me. We call ourselves followers of Christ. And this idea of following is not just in the New Testament, it's throughout. But something I know I have to wrestle with at times, and I know we all need to, is, am I following? Or am I doing my own thing? So what I'd like to do for our meditative moment is I'm going to read one little scripture, and then we're going to meditate on just the idea of following Jesus. That we're not going our own way, we're following where he leads in every part of our life. So what I want to read, actually, it comes from the Old Testament. It comes from the book of Ruth. Ruth chapter 1. Ruth is probably somebody we should read much more often. But it's just chapter 1, verse 16. And out of the NASB it reads, "But Ruth said, 'Do not urge me to leave you or turn back from following you. For where you go, I will go, and where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God my God.'" That statement that Ruth makes, I feel, is the core of when we say we are going to follow you, Christ. We are going to follow you, Jesus. Saying, don't turn me away, please. I will follow you. Where you go, I will go. Where you stop, I'll stop. Your people, your family will be my family. You will be my God, not these other things. This all-in, full-encompassing, every fiber of my being will follow you. And that can seem really heavy with what I'm saying that, but there's this heart that I believe we must have in our lives. Of saying, I will follow you, God. So let's take a moment for 30 seconds and just meditate on just this one idea of, I will follow you, Jesus, wherever you go. So let's meditate for 30 seconds. So in light of this idea of following, something that Sid really started bringing out, which was awesome, was this idea of just saying yes. That even in the midst of him feeling completely inadequate and unequipped to care for these young men and be a father figure to them, and as he wrestled with that, he just felt God saying, say yes to this. And he has said yes, and he has had such an impact in these men's lives for so long. And out of that conversation, even while I was sitting with him, the question came into my mind for us of, what am I supposed to say yes to? What is God asking me? What is God asking you to say yes to in your life? He's asking something of all of us because he wants to partner with us. He wants us to be active in our faith, active in the things that he is doing. But he doesn't force us. He invites us. So my question to you today is, what is the Spirit asking you to say yes to? And will you say yes? I just want to leave you with just a blessing that whatever that is, that the Lord bless that in your life. And bless the people that you interact with in that. That there will be something vibrant and beautiful that grows out of saying yes to that thing of God. Thank you for being with us again this week for the table, A Table for One. And we'll be back again next week for another episode. Otherwise, have a wonderful rest of your week. Join us for our prayer time, 9 o'clock on Saturday. Otherwise, have a wonderful week, and we will see you next time.